Hello there and welcome in to Career Competitor, the show that seeks to light that competitive fire within you in order to jumpstart or optimize your career. I'm Steve Meller, your performance coach, and today we are talking all about coaching. I'm welcoming back to the show Lee Povey, and I will get to introducing him a little bit more as well as what he's here to talk about with me today. But before I do that, let me just remind you to head to careercompetitor.com, where you can learn all about my services as both a performance coach and a culture consultant. Also, with you listening to the show right now, before you go anywhere, why wouldn't you just click the 5th star? Okay, it's not too much to ask. Whatever device you're listening to me on right now, go ahead, click that 5th star, drop a rating as well. Some sort of review would be wonderful. And finally, feel free to reach out, steve@careercompetitor.com, not only to take advantage of a free 30-minute consultation to see how I can maybe be of service to you, but at the same time, I would just simply love to hear from you, what your thoughts are on the show, how you maybe connect and resonate with the content that we're providing, and furthermore, maybe you or someone you know could be an ideal guest to come on the show. So many reasons to be heading to the website, careercompetitor.com. So many reasons to be coming back and enjoying and reviewing and subscribing, for that matter, to the show. And also plenty of reasons to be reaching out to me at steve@careercompetitor.com as well. Now let's get to my friend Lee Povey, who, like I said, rejoins us on the show to talk about his new service that he has co-founded with another former guest of ours, Myriam Glez, which is called Coach's Soul. Now, Coach's Soul is here to support coaches on their journey from surviving to thriving. They provide the support, coaching, community, and leadership development that you need as a coach in order to excel. Now, the reason I firstly am passionate about this particular topic is because I have been that coach, as has Lee, and that's what we get into within our discussion here. We've both come from this background in sports coaching. We have both been witnesses to the difficulties that come with that space. In addition to that, we've been witness to the lack of support that comes in those roles as well. So Coach's Soul is all about that, and it just so happens that both Lee and I are incredibly passionate about being able to provide the type of service and resources possible to those that are looking to find that support as specifically as sports coaches. But we don't just cover that in relation to what it is Coach's Soul is. We go a little bit deeper, a little bit further into what it means to simply care for yourself, prioritize your own health, and make sure that you're creating the type of support system within your world in order to optimize who it is you are. A lot of the content we cover within this show feeds into these principles and into these ideas, but this particular episode is all about focusing and highlighting exactly this area in relation to the fact that we can never go without enough support, we can never go without enough resources, and we can never over prioritize taking care of ourselves. So keeping in mind what this show is all about, which is about performing at optimal levels, learning how to compete within your field and do it in ways that you never have done before. My conversation with Lee here is going to really open up your eyes to what it means to be vulnerable, what it means to be honest with yourself, and what it means to create that community that you need in order to thrive and feel as though you are not alone in your journey. So without any further delay, let's introduce my buddy Lee Povey back to the Career Competitor podcast, and I hope you all enjoy. Well, it is my pleasure to welcome back to the show, falling into elite company there of returning guests on the Career Competitor podcast, is my friend Lee Povey. Lee, how are you, mate?
I'm great. How are you, buddy?
Very good, very good. Delighted to have you back on, and very much for great reasons too. Yourself and Myriam Glez, who's also a former guest on the podcast too, have joined forces and created a new company in Coach's Soul, and it's something that we're going to chat about here today. Give you this opportunity now, really just to introduce it, maybe even where it originated, the whole genesis behind it.
Lovely, thank you, mate. So I met Myriam through LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. I always had a habit of connecting with other coaches on LinkedIn. Saw that she had a company called Athlete Soul, which is to help athletes progress out of sport got chatting, realized that we have a lot in common about the way that we see sport athletes, coaching, the direction we believe that sport and sports coaching should be going in. And decided from our own experiences and the experiences of our colleagues that there was a big hole for supporting sports coaches. So especially now, athletes are getting way more support. Sports psychology is directed at athletes mainly, and not so much coaches and support staff. And having been an elite coach myself and knowing how lonely it was, I was struggling to have people to talk to share my experiences with. Right. And I ended up befriending national team coaches from other nations who you think would be my biggest competitors. And actually, they were in the same position too. They didn't have people they could talk to. And we were sharing ideas and basically just using each other as a support network. And after that experience and talking to Myriam and realizing she had a very similar experience too, we realized there's this big gap for supporting coaches themselves. And everything falls on the coach. So you look at a sports coach and it's like, right, the buck stops with them. You look at the NBA, the NFL. If the team isn't producing, the first person to get fired is a coach. Even if their best players aren't playing well because the players aren't committed or not playing well. And, as coaches, we have some role in that for sure. But it's always the coach that is the first to be removed and not the athletes that's the first to be removed. So you have probably the most stressful job of everybody. You're carrying the load, emotional load for everybody, the support staff, the team, the results of the team, and yet there's very little places for you to go to get support or to get community. Right. So we've created a company, Coach's Soul. The point of Coach's Soul is kind of like 4 levels of support. So the first level of support is a membership with a forum. It's going to be free for 6 months. Come join, come talk about coaching. I know that you're on there, I'm on there. People can ask us questions, can talk to us about anything they want. They can ask other coaches questions. So we've just got a forum where we can get coaches together. I don't know of a forum that really exists like that in this way, where we can just, as coaches, talk. And there's forums for different sports like this, but not specifically for coaches across all sports. So that's level 1. And part of that membership will be a monthly workshop. So the first one is going to be June the 8th. It's 8:00 PST, so that's West Coast and American time, a 90-minute workshop on world-class feedback. So that's how we learn, how to give feedback in a way that people can hear it, the common mistakes that we say when coaches are giving feedback, and then really how to take your feedback and coaching game from good to really world-class, and the common habits of world-class coaches. So that's level 1. Level 2 is peer groups. So this will be groups for coaches, maximum of 10 per group, 90 minutes every twice a month. And this will be very similar to the men's groups and leadership groups I run. So we get together, we talk about what comes up for you as a coach. We talk about how you be in the world and how that impacts your athletes and impacts your staff. And we work on that and help you be the best version of yourself and the best leader that you could possibly be. And then the last 2 levels are video analysis of you coaching. Super powerful. I've had it done to me both as an emotional coach and as a sports coach. Probably the best training aid I've ever had. And quite eye-opening and somewhat scary the first time it happens. And you watch yourself back.
Very revealing.
Very revealing. You watch yourself back and you're like, oh, wow, I didn't realize I'd do that.
Right.
It ups your game so quickly. So we'll be offering that, and then 1-to-1 emotional coaching from one of our mentor coaches, which you will, I'm very excited to say you'll be joining us on.
Absolutely. And I wanted to obviously get to that. For me, this is, I love hopping on this passion project of yours and being involved. And the moment I think you probably spoke to me about it for about 20 seconds, and I probably stopped you and said, sign me up. Just let me know. Let me know when you roll it out and I'm there. And so the reason I was that passionate about it was that the gap is there. The gap is there in this market. If you want to make it a business analogy, but just in terms of a human analogy, there's a massive gap in what it means to be supported as an elite coach, and especially in the world of sport. And as you said, it is a lonely place at times, and when things aren't going well for the athlete, you do become a figure of blame, and that's tough. And on the flip side of that, when things do go well for the athlete, more often than not, the athlete is the one that gets all the acknowledgement for that work. And sometimes even just simply trying to rationalize a process like that, which on the surface, if you presented an opportunity to someone where, if things don't go well, you'll be berated. And if things do go well, no one will acknowledge it. Someone will say, I don't want to sign up for that. And yet we have thousands upon thousands of people that do it for a living. So with that being said, I think that was one of the things that really resonated with me, is like, what does that gap look like in terms of a service like this being inserted into it and connecting people from a place of where they can feel lonely, they can feel isolated, to having a place where they can be heard and certainly supported?
There's a couple of things there that I think I really want to highlight. So one, I think you really eloquently described what elite coaching is. The buck stops with you. You're responsible for the athlete's performances. And, if it's an individual sport, and the team's performances, if it's a team sport, you're the most at risk, yet you get the least of the rewards emotionally. So the athletes get the plaudits, the team gets the plaudits, and usually, sometimes, especially in professional sports here, it's a little different. But, if you're talking of Olympic sports, most people wouldn't have an idea who the coach is. They just see that Olympic athlete going out there and winning. Or, if it's teams like, amateur or Olympic soccer, for example, most people don't know who the coach is. They just see the team. So one of the great things about the world that I'm in now, which is this emotional coaching, leadership coaching world, is how we recognize, acknowledge, and support each other in that community. And it really opened my eyes to what is possible and how you can support another human being, but also how you can support another leader in their leadership and really see them and acknowledge them. So a big part of what we will do will be acknowledging great coaching. And I'm not just talking about results. I'm talking about the way that coaches speak to their athletes, the way that they hold a room, the way that they hold attention, the way that they care for their athletes. The subtle stuff that the outside world doesn't see, you will get supported there by either your individual coach member, the forum, or if you're in one of the leadership groups. And I think that's going to be really impactful. I was talking to a world-class coach last week, and he said he knows that when he ends his career, his athletes aren't going to remember him. And I said, I pushed a bit on that. And I said,
Sure.
I think you're having a bigger impact than you realize.
Yeah.
But, he said their job is to be selfish. And then the next coach will come along and they'll work with the next coach. And I know that he's been impactful. And I think you'll be a bit surprised that people will keep in touch with him. But that's often how it feels as a coach. Like, to the athletes, you're just part of the puzzle. You're just somebody that helps them get to where they want to get. And being able to support coaches and to really help you get recognized. And I don't blame the athletes for this, because I actually think, a healthy way for an elite athlete to be is extremely selfish. They should be looking at everybody to support them be the best version of them. So I don't have, any blame with athletes. They're not doing anything wrong. It's just that's the nature of being an elite coach, is you get missed often.
Yeah, it's a couple of really valuable points there. I'll try to come back to the idea of the impact people like yourself are having within the business world, and the results, and how welcoming the results are in that world. But off that last point that you made there, just in the opportunity to add something to this world of elite level sport, is how people need to hear this. There's no fires to be put out, and I think this is something that I currently do in my world now, working with some leaders, working with some teams and organizations. When I talk about culture, I try to let them know, like, listen, we don't need a fire to put out for there to be for there to be something to work on. This can just simply be an evolution. This can just be something that we're adding to what already exists. And I think so much of what you're saying here is, this isn't hey, athletes, give up some of the limelight, for crying out loud. That's not what we're saying here. This is not that at all. It's us being able to say, listen, coaches, there's just this gap where we can insert a service. There's a gap where we can insert some conversation, some support that for some reason has gone decades upon decades, centuries upon centuries without being filled. And we're saying now's that time. And I think that's just a really important thing to just add to what you were saying there, because we do live in a culture where it's like, well, if we're going to do this, what's the problem? Or who do we have to blame, so to speak? There's no blame game here. This is simply saying, listen, we recognize a gap, and we're here to offer a service that can help with that gap, that can satisfy some of the issues there. But just I do want to go back to also what you were saying there about how this is already and has been working in the corporate sector for a long time. This was something that 20, 30 years ago, the term coach didn't exist in that area either. The idea of a leader giving up information about themselves and being vulnerable with another person to advance their own ability to be supportive to those that they oversee, to advance their profession and their career, that didn't exist. And that was a gap at the time, and that gap has been filled, and it continues to be filled, and it continues to be built upon. And that's very much where we are here. This is, as I used that word Genesis before, I think this is where we are in what you're presenting here through Coach's Soul. Is we're potentially at the beginning of something that could be enormous. And again, like I said, that's why I didn't hesitate for even a moment to hop on and get involved.
Thank you, Steve. I'm in a bit of an unusual position because I was an elite athlete as a junior, realized I wasn't quite going to be world class. So I went the business route, worked in real estate for 12 years, including having my own company at the end of it. Got a ton of training on leadership and how to coach my staff. And then went the opposite way, went back to sport and came to sport with a business background, which allowed me to look at sport in a probably somewhat more professional way than some coaches do. Because most coaches go immediately from being an athlete to being a coach. And I had that business background of training. And then now I've gone back the other way, and I've taken everything I learned in sport about leadership, culture, commitment, values, passion, drive, and I'm taking that to business. And there's a lot that you can take from sport to business. What you're describing, and what we haven't seen a lot of yet, is a lot more of this leadership stuff from business going back to sport. We assume coaches know everything about leadership because you immediately get the recognition of, well, you're the coach, right? You're in charge. Yeah, leadership is a skill the same as everything else. Leadership is a skill the same as improving your tennis serve is a skill. The same as squatting more weight in a gym to improve your athletic performance. These are all skills and they're all trainable. Leadership, culture, holding a group, knowing how to emotionally connect with people, and probably most important of all of that, knowing yourself so well that you know when you're getting in the way and you know the triggers to avoid and how to work around your own ways of adapting to the world. That stuff makes such a difference. And leaders in corporations are buying into that in bucket loads. Like I am so busy with working with these corporations. And yeah, I see this big gap in sports coaches. And I think partly it's because there's a belief that sports coaches must be martyrs. So, most sports coaching was amateur until reasonably recently. Even at Olympic levels now, like the wages are still low in lots of sports. My sport, track cycling, the wage was, I had to have my own private coaching business to be able to afford to be the national team coach. What a thing to say for a sport that has the potential of 6 Olympic gold medals. It's crazy to think like that, but that's what the funding's like in some of these Olympic sports. So they are still in a way amateur, and you're expected to be a martyr and to give your time up and to do stuff for free. And we want to help change that too. We want to really help make all these sports more professional, help coaches be more professional in their outlook and their demands and how they are supported themselves. Because there's so much that athletics and elite sports can learn from the world of business and how those leaders look at leadership, how they look at empowering everybody around them to be leaders, instead of thinking as the coach, you have to have all the answers and the buck stops with you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You don't have it all figured out. And I think it's just, it's funny how we're having this conversation. I put something on social media, for what it's worth, just 24 hours ago about exactly this message of just not having it all figured out. And here you and I are in a profession now, building our own respective businesses based around this idea of facilitating growth and improvement, or however you want to put it, in other people. And so much of your work, on just consciousness and conscious leadership. And, I'm going to put in the show notes, the first time when you came on too, because it's important that people go back and listen more about your story, more about the way you do what it is you do every single day. But a lot of what I do is about the optimal self and striving towards that and shaping that. But so much of what we're both talking about here is knowing yourself, as you put it there before. It's just, if there's any reason to look into something like this, a service like this, to have a curiosity towards, okay, maybe this is just going to help me know myself a little bit better. And through knowing myself better, won't it be easier for me to show up as the version of myself that I feel most comfortable with? And through that, won't that even be easier then for me to have that vulnerability at times, where I just maybe break that wall down and just say, listen, yes, I'm the coach, but I'm going to admit it. I don't have the answer here. And I would love to hear your insight, athlete. I would love to hear your insight, assistant coach that works with me, whoever it may be. I would love your insight, because I don't have the answer on this occasion. I don't want to portray to you that I always do. That comfort of knowing yourself will always allow you to bring a more authentic version of yourself to the table each and every day. And it's something that it speaks to me so much, because quite honestly, our stories are so similar in that we both went to the top of the mountain in many ways as coaches in the sports world. And then we just kind of hopped off at the top of the mountain and just said, you know what, we're good. I'm going to venture back down and climb up another mountain in a different world. And we've now been able to start this climb. You're a few months ahead of me in that regard, but we can look back at that experience that we had in our elite sports world, in our elite sports careers, and see the gap and understand that the need for this service, and very much see the importance as two people that do so much work on knowing themselves as you and I do, and then obviously facilitating that with others. Now looking back on that world and saying, yeah, there's need for that over there too.
Yeah, I mean, I say this to the clients that I work with all the time. I don't have all the answers. It's not my job to have all the answers. My job is to support you in discovering the right answer for yourself. Mm-hmm. And as sports coaches, when we think we have to have all the answers, it kind of pushes us into a place where we start to make stuff up. And the athletes know this. And it really affects trust. I was speaking to an athlete that I used to coach, and we were talking about coaching. And he said something very flattering. He said, "You're still the best coach I've ever had." And he's gone on to have many world-class coaches. And I was like, wow, why? Look at the results you're having with these coaches. And he said, it's not necessarily about that. It's about the fact that you never thought you knew it all. He said, I've had other coaches, I take an idea to them, and they'll tell me why this idea can't work without even listening to it. Because for them, it somehow leaves them feeling like they're less of a coach if they didn't already know this thing and they don't know everything about it. So they just shoot it down. And he said, with you, I'd come to you with an idea and your first response would be, that's interesting, let's look at it. Mm-hmm. And you might even task me with going off like the athlete, and I'd say to them, right, go and research this, come back to me with more data. Let's see what we can find out about it, or let's try it. Mm-hmm. And I think there's this kind of disconnect between being a leader and having all the answers. And lots of leaders think it's your responsibility to have all the answers, when actually you look around the room and you've got so much wisdom in the room. Like, the athletes know themselves better than we know them. So instead of telling them what to do the whole time, we should be asking them, hey, what do you need? What do you think? How's this working for you? How's your body responding to this? Mm-hmm. And, I used to be on a lot of sports forums and track cycling forums and stuff. And we'd spend so much time talking about technical issues like, how do I ride my bike faster? How do I lift more in the gym to ride my bike faster? Right. And so little time talking about our emotional wellness and what difference that makes. And for coaches, that's such a huge part of it, how you connect to the athlete. You know, as a coach, as a sports coach, I didn't get any training on that. Any of the training or qualifications I've had to do to be able to do my sport, none of them have touched on how you communicate with your athletes. Mm-hmm. What's appropriate, what's not appropriate. We have that from safe sport, from like, hey, what's appropriate from a safety point of view,
of course, right.
But not to what's appropriate from a learning point of view or a supportive point of view. Like, what's your job? Where do you refer out to? Maybe, you know, a therapist, as a you know, emotional therapist. You know, where does it stop? Where do you stop as a coach? Where should you employ an emotional coach instead of you? Or where should you employ a sports psychologist? And then how do we help you as coaches have a bigger breadth as well? Mm-hmm. None of that was discussed. It's just, you know, how do you get on the bike and go faster?
Right. And the thing is, with the safe sports and all this other stuff, they have their place, but they're there to they're there to make sure we don't have problems. They're there to make sure that we don't get in trouble, as opposed to enhance, empower, build. And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about adding on something. We're talking about building and facilitating growth. And we're not talking about covering our asses, so to speak, in terms of making sure we don't do something wrong. And I think that's, again, it's really important to hear that, because again, as this whole is if we want to dive another layer here, it's just like, once we go into the way athletes have now started to be supported, it's great. But we're opening a massive hole with that, huge hole when we talk about mental health. Well, is it mental health or is it mental performance? Like, well, what does the individual need? And it's great that we're starting to look at that. But again, how do we do that in a way where we are always trying to empower and enhance, as opposed to, oh, let's just make sure we're covering ourselves and not getting ourselves in trouble in the long term? Because for me, that's why I use the analogy of putting out fires before. I hate putting out fires. I don't like living a life of putting out fires, because it's reactionary. That's not a reactionary life. Is never going to be a fulfilling life. Yeah. And for what we're talking about here, we're seeing the big picture. We're looking beyond the current situation and saying, how do we build? How do we enhance? How do we add support? Well, however you want to put it in ways where we can always discover more through the process, as opposed to, as you were saying, so many things that are in place right now, we're just maintaining, we're just making sure we're not getting in trouble. And that's not what this service is, and that's not what it's about. And I know you and I obviously see that the same way.
Yeah, it's a great distinction. Often people look at things like sports psychology, emotional coaching, as putting fires out, putting a Band-Aid on. And actually, that's not how I look at it at all. I look at it as developing really solid skill sets so that you don't have fires anymore. Right. You know, you develop such good skill sets that you don't get to that place. Mm-hmm. And even if you do, you know what to do with it immediately. You know how to proceed from there. And, you know, I really like the slant you're taking here about enhancing. The way I look at the world is everybody's doing the best they can with what they've got. And by that, I mean, there's very few evil people in the world.
Sure.
Right? Most people are really genuine. They're trying to do the best they can. And when we see people struggling or not doing it how we think they should do it, or not doing it in optimal ways, they're not consciously trying to do that.
Right.
It's usually a lack of training or a lack of skill sets available to them. It's not because they don't want it. It's just because they've not been experienced to it. You know, I think about myself and my journey, and I was terrible at giving feedback. Mm-hmm. Now, I've always been really analytical and very observant. So I could always walk into any sporting arena, it doesn't even matter the sport, and tell you how somebody could be doing something better. And especially the sports that I was interested in. I can tell you exactly how everybody in the room should be doing it better. And I just walk up to them and tell them.
Right.
And I can tell you now that's really ineffective, because actually what you do is you make the other person feel worse. You make them feel like they're failing. You make them feel like they're not good at what they're doing. And instead, you can go and do a collaborative approach. First, you can see if they're open to the feedback. Then if they are, speak to them about where they believe they're at now, and then look for the gaps and the gain areas that you do collaboratively, rather than this big kind of bad guy coming in and saying, hey, let me tell you all the ways that you're rubbish. That wasn't my intent. My intent hasn't changed. My intent is to improve the world. Like, it's genuinely to improve the world. But my skill set was so poor, my impact was very different to how it is now. And I see that in business and I see that in coaching. I do these workshops of business on giving feedback, so performance reviews, how they're coaching their staffs. And you see a dramatic impact just from some subtle language changes. And we want to bring this to the world of sports. We don't want coaches to think they have to have all the answers. We want them to be curious and to realize it's just a lifelong journey of growing, rather than I'm the coach, I must know everything or I'm a failure. Nobody knows everything. And things change. You know, what I knew 10 years ago, there's different protocols now.
Exactly. I mean, that's probably part 2, part 3, part 4 of another podcast of how things evolve and how we must change and adapt. But if there's, you know, for me to sort of have my final say with this whole thing, like, the curiosity is key. It's just, and you already used the word, it's a word I use frequently on a daily basis with clients. And even just when I'm having that self-talk with myself, just like, what are you missing? What are you not seeing? You know, and are you rushing this? Are you seeing it incorrectly? Whatever it might be, that curiosity to always ask one more question, to have one more sense of discovery and willingness to discover through a process. And so much of what we've talked about here, and so much of the idea behind this service that is Coach's Soul, is it's going to facilitate people that arrive curious. Like, if you arrive curious, you are going to get so much out of this. And that is, when you look at the way in which you coach your athletes, would you ask for much more from an athlete? When you think about it, you talk about someone who's coachable. I mean, curiosity is a beautiful trait for an athlete to have when you talk about being coachable.
Curiosity and honesty. Are you curious, and can you tell me the truth?
Right.
They're the two things that made the biggest difference that I saw for athletes.
Totally.
Are they curious and they telling themselves and others the truth? And there's an author called Adam Grant who thinks about this stuff in a way that I really like, which is, how can I disprove my position rather than how can I prove my position? Because so many of us are programmed to be really good at finding information to prove our current position. So when we're talking about dogma and being dogmatic, it's very easy to say, well, I did this before and it worked because I got a good result, and not, I did that before and it got a result, but I wonder if the result could have been better if I'd done it a different way. Right. That's where world-class coaches sit. The best coaches that I work, sports coaches, the best leaders I work with, they don't go, oh, that worked before, so we're going to keep doing it. They go, how can I change this to be better? What is it? As you just said, what is it I'm missing? How can I change this to be better? How can I disprove the way we're doing it right now and find a better way of doing it? Yeah. And there's bravery, there's curiosity, and there's honesty in that. And if you can keep being brave, keep being curious, and keep being honest with yourself and then others, you're going to really evolve. And my job and your job as emotional coaches is just to hold somebody's hand and support them in that journey. You know, when we run these leadership groups, there's so much wisdom in the room. I'm not the person that's telling everybody what to do. Mm-hmm. I'm facilitating the wisdom in the room to come out and people to feel comfortable to share of their experiences, both good and bad, in a way that the entire room learns from it. Now, I might share some emotional models to speed that process up, and I might share some emotional models to help us locate where we are and give us language to understand what we're saying and what other people are saying. But I'm not giving you the answers. I'm not going to teach you how to be better at your sport. I'm going to teach you how to be able to understand yourself in such a way that you have the biggest impact possible.
Right. Get to know yourself. And I think that's... it's a great message to finish this on. But before I let you go, Lee, tell everybody where they need to be going to obviously learn all about everything that Coach's Soul is going to be able to offer them.
Lovely. Thank you, mate. Yeah, jump onto the website, coachessoul.com. Sign up for the forum. We're doing, as I said, 6 months free membership. Code is on the website. Sign up, get your free membership, get on the forum, get actively involved in the discussions. Come to the first workshop that we have on the 8th of June. You have to sign up for the forum first, and then you'll get access to that workshop. And then book a free consultation with me or one of the other coaches to understand what this is. Mm-hmm. It can be a bit abstract to sit here and talk about leadership and coaching. Jump on a call with one of us. We offer free calls. Jump on, understand what it's about. We do a concierge service. So somebody will be put in contact with me, then I'll recommend 2 or 3 coaches that I think will best suit you. Go and interview them, see who you think is right for you, find out what this is about, and then do your work. Do your work. I'm coached. I'm in a group. I'm actually in 2 groups. I have my individual coach. I'm in a men's group. I know that even where I'm at and 20, 30 years of work on this, I still got a lot of growth to do to understand me enough to be able to support others. And that's my journey, is keep understanding me more to support others. And you keep nailing this on the head, Steve. The more we understand ourselves, the more impactful we can be.
100%. Well, good stuff. I'm so glad we were able to do this. It goes a little bit off what we normally do, but the beauty of this is it kind of became exactly what the show's all about through the process of it too. So how about that? We kind of checked a few boxes along the way, and I think created an episode that, hey, listen, even if you're not in the coaching world, I think you understand as any passionate leader, or certainly wannabe leader, that there's some messages here that were for you and for you to benefit from if you were listening carefully enough. So Lee, thanks for the time. Really appreciate it. Can't wait to continue working on this, obviously, with you, mate. And I'm sure we'll be talking soon.
Thank you, buddy.
And my thanks again to Lee for joining me back on the show to talk about everything in relation to Coach's Soul, and also just to have a conversation. It really wasn't an interview as much as it was a conversation between Lee and I. And that's when the show is, in my opinion, really at its best. It's its truest self, when 2 individuals are just chatting away and we're revealing ideas and theories and perspectives about what it is we do, how it is we found success, and what we believe is essential in other people finding their success too. So Lee and I very much were able to do that in our conversation. In addition to that, if you are a person within the sports world as a coach, or if you know of anyone who is coaching within the sports world, make sure you're heading to coachessoul.com. Learn about the service, learn about how this can be utilized by yourself. There's probably no better time to do it than right as Coach's Soul is getting going, simply because it's in its cheapest form. How about that? How about a financial incentive? This is as cheap as it's ever going to get to be part of something like this. So make sure you're taking the time to get involved, to reach out to someone like Lee. Heck, you can even reach out to myself, and I'll act as a middleman between you and Lee and Myriam as well over there with Coach's Soul. But also be sure to listen and pay attention to what it was that we covered here in relation to what it means to engage with your emotions, to validate the fact that you aren't alone and that you do need support and you do need help. And for those of you that maybe have no connection to the sports world at this point, if you're still listening to the show 38 minutes in at this point, then I would really recommend that you consider what it means to be coached and the impact that it can have on your world, on your career. If you are someone that feels as though they have the means to invest in coaching, then you need to do it. You need to find out what this type of a resource can do for you. And this isn't my way of plugging myself. There's hundreds upon thousands of coaches the world over. There's going to be one out there for you. There's going to be one out there that works within what it is you're doing. So just don't hesitate to at least reach out and see if something like that could be of use to you, because it's good to feel supported. It's good to feel as though your intentions are being met in a way that is healthy, that you can strive towards being successful and not do it at a detriment to your health and to your well-being. And that's what working in a world like this is all about. And that's what investing in resources like this is also all about. So thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate the fact that you've been willing to stay with me here through the 40th minute of the episode. If you're still listening, make sure you click that 5th star on your way out. Leave a review. Feel free to reach out to me, steve@careercompetitor.com. Subscribe to the show, go to the website, blah, 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 right? Oh, so on and so forth. Just do all of the things, because Career Competitor is here to facilitate your performance, your growth, and to help you reach optimal levels. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate your attention. Best of luck with anything and everything you've got going on within your world. And bye for now.